feel bad for my two colleagues here with me that they feel, you know, one has been kicked out by the health department, one has been trailed by the Memphis police. You know, this is, you know, they're in an adversarial mode, and that's why we need statesmen that is for bringing the people together, who has the vision to be able to unite the city, to be able to have a vision, not personal vendettas. So, I mean, I'm disheartened, but I'm glad I'm here. To answer your question, most definitely, I think Kat, and I'm a fan of Kat and your work in the community, most definitely. I'm a fan of you, Doctor. You know, I mean, I supported your campaign financially. So I would do the same thing for you, Kat. But I disagree with Kat when she says that the research shows that sky cops are not effective, because you can look even from the areas that I'm familiar with, because we own a sky cop. Well, we don't own a sky cop, but we have a sky cop at our church. So, and I know the good vibes and the perception and the good feelings. A lot of this is all about perception and in the vibes. That's why people in Shady Grove make sure that they have the sky cops. They don't have a lot of crime, but it's the perception and it's the feeling that, hey, we have extra security. This is why every new development, like Crosstown, you have several sky cops there. It's the perception. You have Beale Street downtown, you have more sky cops. So anything we can do to help increase the perception and the feeling of our citizenry of security, we have to be against that. There's no way you can be opposed to that when people feel good about having those sky cops in the community around Christmas time. Why do shopping centers increase in the investment of sky cops? Because it's the perception and the feeling that shoppers have to say, hey, we have extra security. So I love you, but I disagree with you wholeheartedly on that point. But at the same time, again, Matavius Jones, $400,000 to his friends. That's 72 sky cops. That's just one city council person. Now, each city council person as well have contributed money to some people, organizations that they know. Every year we give away $2.6 million in grant money to a lot of different organizations in Memphis. So many of these different politicians are giving funds away to their friends. That's sky cop money without any increased tax revenue. That's an easy fix. That's an easy fix. So number one, to make sure that we are strategically placing them in the right areas, which I believe all communities are the right areas. I'm not opposed to having them in the upper scale community as well as the lower scale community, but at the same time, we would prioritize by making sure that the highest crime areas would get those sky cops first. And I think even the upper middle class communities would agree with that. But this is why people like the upper class communities and even myself, I could afford a sky cop. Well, basically, I paid $500 for a sky cop for my church, and I didn't ask my church a dime. So people who can afford it, we're not opposed to paying for these type of things ourselves, but for the people that can't afford it, then I think naturally we could prioritize making sure that in those high crime areas that they get placement of those sky cops first. And then we could also have extra funds to help, as you were saying, Kat, if you feel that the Memphis Police Department needs better training to help increase a great relationship with the people they serve, then we can also have advanced training for the Memphis Police Department, because I'm for hiring more police officers. There's no reason that Jackson, Tennessee should have more police officers per capita than the city of Memphis. So I'm for the placement of sky cop in these high crime areas. I'm for placing them in even our middle class areas, because guess what? We don't want our middle class residents community to flee Memphis either. We don't want our upper middle class community to flee Memphis either. So there has to be a balance. We have to keep all of our communities safe. We have to make that a priority as well. We can't say, well, they have money, they don't need anything. Man, we have to address all of our taxpayers and make sure all of our taxpayers are feeling secure and are feeling safe.
Kat Allen, same question. You want to repeat it?
Yeah. Strategy for dealing with the issues that concern you. What would be your strategy for crime reduction with fewer cops?
Yeah. So,
Without increasing the police budget and fewer cops, so how you think, what would you do to reduce crime? What would be your strategy?
right, yeah, and for the purposes of just, again, speaking to data, we're currently only about 400 officers short of what Mayor Strickland says his goal is, just so it's out there. So what would I do? So the first thing is, what we know for sure is that police are not receiving the type of training that they need to nonviolently deal with situations that can remain nonviolent. And that's not necessarily just coming from the community, that's coming from officers also. I am not an anti-police candidate. In fact, most of my crime reduction and police and fire policies have come from speaking directly to members of the Memphis Police Department and saying, do you feel like you have what you need? And what are those things that you need? So what we know is that in terms of the police budget, there are larger buckets of money that sort of say higher level, right? But then each precinct is given its own bucket of money as well. So if elected, what I would do is I would take a tour of all of the precincts in my district. And I would have a conversation with rank and file officers, which is something I've already been doing, and also, lieutenants and colonels, and saying precinct by precinct, what are the specific issues of violent crime? Because violent crime is a very broad term. What are the specific issues of violent crime in this neighborhood? I mean, certainly I live in Sherwood Forest. I can speak to what's happening in my immediate area, but Super District 8 is literally half of the city. So what's right for Sherwood Forest is not necessarily right for Westwood or New Chicago. So we would go and we would talk and we would say, what do you need? Let's talk about allocating resources. Let's talk about what your officers need, and that's what we work as a council and with the mayor and with the police director for, to work together as a community to solve these issues. I would also love to have more events where the community and the police can come together in a way that is very low pressure, not highly publicized either, because I think there's a lot of pressure to perform in a certain way. But cop stops have worked really well with our neighborhood association as well, and that has, allowed folks in our neighborhoods to know the officers. I'm also not entirely opposed to re-examining a requirement on Memphis police officers living in the city of Memphis. I think if you can serve the community that you live in, then your service is so much more impactful. So those are a few places that I think are just low-hanging fruit to start with.
My next question involves poverty, and some of you have brought that topic up in your comments earlier. And my question really concerns what you would do in terms of a strategy to deal with generational poverty as well as the high rates of poverty in this region. I think you know the numbers. 39% of the children in this community live in poverty. The region, in terms of the city, about 25% of the city residents live in poverty. We have one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, I think number 2 behind New Orleans, if I remember correctly. And I just want to know how you would deal with that. So I want to start with you, Cal.
Okay, so for the last several years, speaking directly to my most recent experience, it's been a privilege to chair the board of directors for the Mid-South Peace and Justice Center. And I say that to say that experience is relevant when it comes to solving for the issue of poverty for a few different reasons. So we've been fortunate enough to work alongside other organizations such as 5 for 15. And there's where I got it, and on the ground, not super high level academic, but on the ground firsthand experience with understanding what it's like to have to raise a family and pay bills and work 2 or 3 jobs and still not be able to make ends meet. So when we talk about poverty and the issues of homelessness and things like that, I know it's an easy soundbite to say that the solution to poverty is money and the solution to homelessness is housing, but those are, that is how you do it. So a couple of things that we worked with at the Peace and Justice Center were transit. So transit is a really relevant thing, and it seems seemingly unrelated and maybe small, but it's a huge deal. So the mayor is currently touting $19 billion in development in the city over the course of his first term. And that's translating, as he tells it, to more jobs and more opportunities. But what we also have are communities who are completely cut off from these opportunities because of a lack of adequate funding for MATA. Is the solution to throw millions of dollars at MATA? No. The solution is for people who actually care to sit down and figure out what is happening at MATA. So that requires folks to be on the board of MATA who are constituents, who are bus riders. I know that we're making strides, but I think there need to be more voices of everyday folks who are transit users. Because when we can work to build on what the city and county have worked together on to provide $5 million collectively in funding for MATA, but we know I think 30 million is the ideal number. When we can get to a place where we have public transit that works for everyone across the city, then we can literally connect folks to these opportunities that we're so proud of, but are unfortunately inaccessible to many people. So aside from a living wage and transit, I think the other way that you can solve for generational poverty is equitable economic development. So making sure that this momentum that we've got in the city is reaching 38106, 38126 just as easily as it is 38119 and 38120.
Reverend Kai?
Okay, awesome question. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to address this. Poverty, going back to the crime that I think Kat mentioned about as well, because I think poverty and crime go hand in hand. And I know Kat was saying that she wanted to interview some of the police officers to find out what we can help do with crime, and also coming together for events, having, I guess, the pom-poms out and cheerleaders out to meet with the police officers. But me being, coming from a high crime area, Orange Mountain, growing up in a high crime area, in a high poverty area, Orange Mountain, I don't have to interview anybody. I know what the solution is. I know how to have upward mobility. I know what brought me out of the hood, so to say. I know without interviewing a police officer why these people are committing the crimes. I'm a chaplain at the Shelby County Corrections Facility as well. We go into the prisons. Our church has had a relationship with the prisons for over 15 years, so twice a month we go into the prisons, so to talk to the people, to minister to them. So I know exactly why there's crime, and I know how to get out of it as well, which is number one, addressing education. We must have an emphasis on top educators. I, of course, was a school teacher for 18 years in Memphis City School, so I have personally, at Melrose High School, I have personally helped to transform the lives, being a role model, helped transform the lives of thousands of students in the high crime area who had potential to become criminals. And me being there with them, being in their presence, they're seeing me on TV, they're seeing me on and operate businesses. They know that I'm a published author, writing books. So those things had a major impact. I created a mentor program called It Takes a Village to Raise a Child. So to have a mentor program to work with these kids and to help elevate them, to take them on field trips, places that they've never been. I've taken kids to Nashville, to the Cheesecake Factory before we had the Cheesecake Factory in Memphis. I've taken kids to Blanchard Springs, Arkansas, to the caves, and we still do these trips to help mentor these kids and to help take kids like Tangela, who was a kid in Westwood, who mother wasn't there for her in jail, mentored her, and now she graduated from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. So I've worked hand in hand, and not only as an educator, a top educator, but as a mentor for these kids. So we have to recruit more mentors as well to be in the lives of these children, to help guide them to positivity, to help teach them about the dangers of crime, having your record, getting a record that can prevent you from having a job in the future. So there's thousands of kids from Orange Mountain that can vouch for my work in the community, what I've done as a leader. Don't have to interview the police officers. I don't have to have a fun time with the police officers. Those kids are not looking for that. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for somebody who will take them to the movie theater. They're looking for somebody who can show them how to apply for a job, how to fill out a job application, how to fill out for their college grant applications. They're looking for people like Kat and like Dr. Williams and myself to be in their lives, not just sitting and having meetings. That's not going to help these kids. I know what's going to help these kids because I was one of those kids. So we need people who are working with these children who are out here doing the crime, who are committing these crimes, to help show them there's another way, there's a better way. And I don't think any representative, any potential candidate for District 83 is better at that and has a history of doing that other than myself.
Dr. Williams, same question?
I'm gonna move a little closer
That's fine.
to Pastor Pam.
That's fine.
Okay, well, I want to give a shout out to him. He did meet, say at the crosstown when we had our thing, that he would definitely support me, and he did give me $200 for my campaign, and I really appreciate that. That was very encouraging, and it's been a pleasure to be your opponent, but not. But anyway, I have started another nonprofit, which is the Resource Reentry Group, and I was in Operation Hope this past couple of rounds ago, and that's an entrepreneurship program. I also was in it when I was in New York in 2011, and I was the first class out of New York to go through that program for entrepreneurship. So I did it here in Memphis to kind of do the nonprofit, and as a result of my business plan, it was a business plan for a credit union, because we have a lot of payday lenders in our area and that kind of thing. And I believe, as far as the poverty rate is concerned, we really need financial literacy in our communities. And so I have started a Dollar for Dignity campaign, where we're raising $581,000 to start our credit union. The credit union will be for anybody who lives in Memphis, works in Memphis, goes to school in Memphis, or worships in Memphis. They can be part of the credit union. And soon I'll be giving out the surveys in order to see what kind of products we're going to produce at the credit union. But we really need to do that, as well as be vigilant about the education system. Unfortunately, it's failing our kids right now, and I believe the city council should have some type of committee or something where we can be a liaison between the county in order to really get what we need for our kids as far as education. I think that's an important key as far as decreasing the poverty rate, as well as decreasing the crime rate in our area. And so I think with that, and then we also need to engage the faith-based community. We need to some kind of way get together, and the people that actually want to worship and believe, people of faith, need to get together a little bit better in this city as well. And so we need to kind of all come together for the community, for the good of Memphis, in order to decrease the poverty rate as well as the crime rate by just doing that. And we just need to have a prayer day right here.
Any more questions, Tanya?
I
So on the council, you're one of a group of people.
Right.
You all have very distinct and defined reasons for why you're running,
Right.
but you're one of a group of people. So what role do you see yourselves playing within that group to get accomplished what you want to accomplish? And how do you see the dynamic playing? What role do you think you would play in that group? Caroline?
Sure. So I think that we can all agree that this is a city council race unlike any we have seen in a minute. And that's a really exciting thing in terms of engaging local voters and what it means for the democratic process here in Memphis. I say all of that to say, we have 10 incumbents running for a second term. There's not a single race on the council that is going unopposed, which is amazing. So what we have in that freshman class of candidates are, folks ranging from people who've been working and serving in their communities for decades to millennial progressive community organizers and activists. And I think there is a strong contingent, and the reason I say that is because just a couple of days ago, Bill Dries from the Daily Memphian wrote this story about this Pledge for Progress. You all may have seen something about it. And it was it reads a lot like a policy platform. And it was signed by 5 separate candidates who all agreed that if we're elected, these are the principles, these are the values, here's where our money's gonna come from for our campaign contributions, here's where it's not gonna come from. And here are the principles of accountability, transparency, and good governance that we're going to live by as council people. So I drafted that pledge. I was one of the people who signed it, along with John Emery, John Merrick, Frank Johnson, and Theron Bond. And so what that means is, how will I there's one of two things that could happen to just cut right to the heart of your question. So we know that, for all of us who are running, not all of us are going to make it. So one scenario is you have a majority of incumbents who are unseated with these new folks, and we have already made it public that we will work together in good faith and with the current council to say, there are some things that have happened in the last several years that have been great, and we want to help you build on that. And then there are other things where we think, we've really taken a wrong turn. So how can we come together and bring what we know works and some fresh, innovative thinking? The other scenario is that we have a large class of freshman councilmen and women. And we have the opportunity as progressives to determine the trajectory of this city for at least a generation, maybe two. This council will be responsible for redrawing districts. And if that's the case, then we all know where we stand, we all know one another, and we all know the direction that we want to see the city go in. So I think the short answer to that is a few new faces in a sea of the same will mean that we'll just have to fight harder for what we want to push the city forward in the way it needs to. And if it goes the other way, then it'll be that much easier for us to work for a more progressive Memphis for all.
Reverend Kyle, same question.
Thank you again. Dan, it's an awesome question. All of you all's questions have been very, very awesome. I think, as I said earlier, that leadership, I'm a little bit different from the average politician because I'm a statesman, not a politician. And with that being said, it takes leadership to truly lead. The problem has come in is that the council people and other politicians have merged themselves and have become corrupt by selling out and following into the pattern of the other corrupt politicians. This is why we need statesmen and stateswomen. This is why we need people who are leaders. I am not opposed to, one of the reasons why I know Federal Express has been so successful. I have several church members who work at Federal Express, but they have a policy where they don't tolerate mess. They will throw people under the bus. And when you saw things that happened at Enron, it's because they tolerated mess. They wouldn't throw people under the bus. Where I'm for the good of the city. If you're corrupt, if you're doing illegal activity, I will throw you under the bus. I will, and you will know that because I'm going to represent integrity. I'm going to represent the highest level. And those people who have the same approach that are good for the city on the council, we will bond together. Those people who are for corruption, who are for the business as usual, they will be exposed. And I will do everything within my power. I will run TV commercials, radio commercials. I will finance it myself to make sure that we drive out all of these crooked politicians so that we can have statesmen and stateswomen who represent the good of our community, like my two friends that are here at this table. So we need to have, again, we need, Dan, true leaders. We don't just need people to blend in. We need people who can stand for principles, who can run our principles. And if that means having a story to tell, and if that's the commercial appeal, writing a story because we're fighting corruption, then that's going to be the headline. But I'm not interested in merging in with more corruption and selling out the good of our city, the future of our city for business as usual, the same type of politics as usual. And I think that I'm one of the few people who, in this entire city council race, who is presidential running in a district race. So I bring a different level of integrity and class than what I've seen throughout much of this entire process.
Dr. Williams, same question.
Repeat the question.
Being a member of a group,
Right.
how do you see your role on the council? What role will you play and how will you work with the group to accomplish what you want to accomplish?
Okay. As far as working with a group, you only have one vote, one voice, okay? So you have to collaborate with other people for the good of the city. You have to have, in order to pass an ordinance, I believe you have to have 7 votes. So there's a way that you can do that based on the geographic area. There will be at least 3 votes in Super District 8. And then we have to get our individual council members on board in order to get whatever we need passed. I believe in the democratic process as far as that's concerned, but I really want to inspire my fellow councilmen or women as far as that's concerned to basically move in a direction to really help and propel Memphis for the people who actually want to live here and work here and worship here in Memphis. I believe that we need to have vision, integrity. We have to be accountable to the people that we want to serve. And that way, if we all keep that in mind, I think we can work together on any problem that Memphis has.
This is the time. Do you have any questions?
Just one last one. Since it's just you three, I guess can you all, each one of you, give me the defining moment in your life that made you say, hey, I want to run for the city council? What happened to you?
Tony, who would you like to start?
You.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can start with you.
That's a great question. So a lot of people who run for office will sit there very sheepishly and say, "Oh gosh, I never thought I'd be," and that's a lie.
Something happened.
Something happened, right, at some point. So I have known that I have wanted to serve in the political sphere since I was a little girl. I grew up in Texas watching people like Barbara Jordan legislate, and few better examples to have, right? And she really inspired me growing up. When I knew I wanted to run for city council, I have tossed the idea around for the last several years now, and if I said anything different, my husband would expose me with a quickness. But I think the defining moment for me, even though I've tossed it around for the last several years, was reaching out to the council a couple of years ago around issues of people experiencing homelessness and how instead of solving for the issue of homelessness in our city, Philip Spinoza, when he was still on the council, chose to bring forth an ordinance that went through 3 readings and was signed into law that criminalizes panhandling. And so essentially what it did was criminalize people who are experiencing homelessness in many instances. Certainly not all, we know that to be true, but why would we go that direction when we can actually solve for these issues? I reached out to them before that 3rd reading and said, listen, Peace and Justice Center has a platform, let's talk about it. And I received from Councilman Jones, from Councilman Swearingen, and from no other council person. It was radio silence, even from my own elected officials. And I said, we can do better. We can do better.
Good story. Interesting. Your story, Reverend.
Another excellent question. I mean, I'm with reporters, so I should expect nothing less. Great response, Kat. Awesome. Very impressive. I'm kind of similar to sit in a city council meeting several months ago and to offer solutions to help fight the opioid epidemic in Memphis that many people think is just a white male problem, but they don't know it's attacking the medical district, the business district, Orange Mound, Westwood, Whitehaven. It's killing residents across Memphis. But to present, as you said, to go to council meetings and to let them know, and they know the statistics. There's been over 170 deaths right now. That's more deaths than murders in Memphis. More deaths in the opioid epidemic and crisis in our city than murders. We have had more people to die in 2018 in Shelby County than in the entire state of Mississippi last year. More people died from opioids overdoses in Shelby County in Memphis than in the entire state of Mississippi. And to sit there and share that with you, and you do nothing, you fund no programs, to address the opioid epidemic, but you give your friends $400,000 in the last 2 years for a reentry program.
You have members in your church with opioids?
We have a program to address it, and I have a person who was homeless as well, who stays in one of our properties, a white female. She came to the council with me.
Okay.
April came and spoke to the council about how we have helped her.
The April story.
Right, to help get people off of the opioid epidemic. We deal with the mentally challenged as well, people who deal with drug abuse. And so we have a treatment program for those. We work with the medical community. So to see you do nothing, you go radio silent on the opioid epidemic, and it's killing people across our district, and you do nothing. You make no funding initiatives to any programs to combat the opioid epidemic, as if we don't want that to be advertised. We just let these people die in silence, but yet we highlight the crime issue, and the opioid epidemic is killing more people than crime, and we do not. That told me that leadership is needed. Leadership is needed.
All right, Doctor.
I guess my story is a little different. I actually had a Sunday school lesson about Amos, who was a prophet, and Martin Luther King quoted about the river in his scripture, and it was about social injustice. And so when I went through that lesson, I thought about it. I felt like I needed to be doing more, and so I decided to run for U.S. Senate at the time. I was in that race a short time until Bredesen got in, and then I went to the state building, and Representative Johnny Turner and Representative Fitzhugh called me in the office and said, Johnny Turner's retiring, so why don't you run for her position? So I ran for her position. I kind of came up short. I came up third place. And so after going through that experience, I said, well, I really need to be helping people here in Memphis where I live. And so as a result of that, when it came up for the appointment for District 6, I went into that, and I went to several city council meetings, so I got to meet all of them. And so I ended up with 4 votes. And so I actually beat Ford. He got 3 and I got 4. So I was excited. I know I was probably in the race just to kind of throw things off, because Jerry Curry came in and kind of took over and got that position. And so after that, I said I decided to run. And I pulled petitions for all 3 races. And so I felt like my chances were better beating a fellow Bison. Martavius was from Howard as well as me, and you know, that's where I went to undergrad. And so I talked to him, and I told him, I said, you're really messing up, and the decisions you've made as far as education and now Memphis 3.0, you've got to go. So I told him that to his face, and he said, well, you don't need to be running against a fellow Bison. You're a Howard University, you know, graduate. And so